My name is Jessie Fresh. Welcome to Opening the Bedroom Doors. I am a sex and intimacy coach, and today I've invited Kaitlyn B to open the bedroom doors to squirting. And we're going to be revealing what everyday people are doing in bed that you never thought they did, so you can discover more of what's always been that you've desired, or you can open the doors to more possibility and discover more of being your full, authentic sexual self. And twice a month, I'll be leading this show where I'll invite experts from my little black book of sexperts, and we're going to talk about sizzling new topics that would open that possibility for you. So if you like the content that we are sharing, if you agree, like, give us hearts, give us thumbs up, interact with us. We love that. So a little bit about me. I work with women and couples to create a deep, intimate connection with mind-blowing sexual pleasure. And in my private practice, I often hear that people are afraid of admitting their desires, or they're ashamed and embarrassed of admitting their desires, and therefore they hide. And my intention with this show is to show you that you're not alone, that it's okay to explore, and since you don't know what's going on behind closed doors, we're going to share what's possible. So today we have the super juicy Kaitlyn B, and we have become good friends over the last year or so. And so Kaitlyn, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Kaitlyn B. I'm a sex and relationship coach. Like Jessie, I am a erotic blueprint certified coach. My specialty in the world has really become coaching with men who have performance anxiety so that they can become confident both in the bedroom and outside of it. And I also am I'm internet famous, I think is the term, for squirting. The thing that kind of propelled me to, started my career as a coach. After I left grad school, I was like a public health professional, a former sexual health researcher, very stodgy, very in the ivory tower. I left that because I wanted to work with people one-on-one to help them have better sex. And I very quickly got asked by a friend of a friend if I would appear on his YouTube channel. And he said, what can we talk about? I really want you to teach about squirting. And I said, yeah, of course, why not? I didn't think anything really of it. I went on this, we recorded at my house, and it was PG-13 content. And that video skyrocketed. It just took off. It got 10 million views. And so I went from this former researcher quitting grad school, I'll coach some people, to suddenly having a huge audience. I founded my YouTube channel. I started my coaching career, and today, actually, to bring it full circle, I'm launching my first ever masterclass on squirting. So what a cool, here we are, full circle. I'll give everybody the link. It is directed at men, but squirting is something that we can all learn how to do and do for ourselves. So I'll make sure you share the link if you want to explore this a little bit deeper later.
Awesome. I realized in preparing for this that squirting was actually my first step towards realizing that I could learn about how to do something for my sex life and accomplish it just by learning. And so I had actually watched a video on YouTube on how to do it, and I was like, oh, I think I can do this. And immediately after, I was able to. And that kind of created this whole plethora of options that I could explore more. So I realized that this was really the catapult of what allowed me to see what was possible in my sex life. So I'm curious. If you have a story about how you were introduced to squirting.
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked. So I was, as I said, I was a sex researcher, and so I definitely believe that squirting was something that you either did or didn't do. Sort of like you have blonde hair, or you have brunette hair. There was no in between, and I didn't think it was something that could be taught. And a lot of the research that I've come across, a lot of the peer-reviewed academic journal level research, it puts a lot of, I would say, doubt around squirting. There's sort of this oh, I don't know, is it pee? Can women really do it? Is it even legitimate? Even one of the most famous books that's directed at men's sexuality, which is called She Comes First, is part of my clients really find that book because it's really about premature ejaculation. The squirting chapter is like 6 pages long. And basically he goes, I don't think it's real. You shouldn't even worry about it. So that's where I was coming from. And then I started dating someone who became now my husband. But at the time I was living in Houston, getting my doctorate, and he came down to visit me. We were like just first dating, and we were already having like pretty epic sex. And then one night we're having sex and he turns to me, he goes, have you ever squirted, or can you squirt, and I was like, no. And I just, I'm like I'm like, fuck, I'm disappointed. Oh, sorry, I cussed. I'm disappointing my new boyfriend, and like he's gonna know that even though I'm a sexpert, I'm a total sexual failure because I can't do this thing, and no one can. It was just like a flood of emotions and fears and thoughts. And then like by the time I could even have those thoughts, he was using this technique on me, and I was squirting everywhere. And it was just like a flood. I turned into a fountain, and I will never, ever in a million years forget that feeling, because it challenged a bunch of things I thought I knew about myself, just the same way as you described. For me, it showed me that what I knew about sex and what my body was capable of doing were in totally different. There was so much division between those two things, despite the fact I'd been studying it for like 10 years at that point. Mm-hmm. Was so much for me to know and learn and explore. And it was a very humbling experience. It was a very emotional experience. It was very transformative, to say the least.
Yes, I would love to talk more about what the experience is for women and or vulva body people. Like, what shows up? I heard you state like the stories that show up, and I recognize that in my practice a lot. There's a lot of stories that we have that then informs our actions. And so I want to go through a little bit more of what can show up in terms of the vulnerability it takes, the skill it takes, and then also like the mindset of like, I'm gonna do it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, those are brilliant questions. So I think the vulnerability especially really speaks to me, because it is a super vulnerable act to squirt. And I actually think that's one of the main things that holds people back from being already juicy, squirting, orgasmic beings, is because it is incredibly vulnerable. In order to allow yourself to squirt, you have to physically, on a physical level, release in a way that feels a little bit like peeing, right? Squirting, female ejaculate comes through the urethra. It is not urine. It often has traces of urine within it because it leaves through the urethra. And it's not like a super clean process where like the bladder is completely turned off, but the urethral tube, which is where the Gspot, where squirting kind of comes from. We'll get into that in just a minute here. But even just that physical process of being able to release on that level, like when I was learning how to squirt, when it was very new to me, there was one time where my partner was trying to make it happen and it really wasn't happening. And it was a total mind space thing. I just wasn't like in the head to be vulnerable. And I just pushed. I ended up peeing all over him, all over the couch. And I knew it was pee because it smelled like the coffee I had just drank. Sorry everyone for putting that into your mind.
I love it.
But it's in order to like actually have that squirting orgasm, you have to be really willing to be physically vulnerable. And then you have to also be vulnerable about making a quote unquote mess. Like, how many of us have ever been sort of shamed, or we've shamed ourselves for like being juicy, for having a lot of fluids, for getting those fluids everywhere, for creating a wet spot. I have a friend who,
for having to come to the hookup or like with your bed pad is a thing.
Yeah.
And also like that shadow that shows up of like, I don't like it. It's messy and it's like wet. And then first it's warm and then it's cold. And then it's like, what do we do with all this? That can definitely, I think, prevent people from even allowing themselves to say yes to it.
Totally. And for people who are naturally squirters, like just came that way, I was teaching a class in college, and this girl like very meekly raised her hand and was like, hey, I have a problem I've been really scared to talk about. Like every time I orgasm, this like thing happens and it's awful. And for her, like there was she didn't even know what she was doing. Like she had no idea that this is a common thing. Like for her, she was like broken. She was deeply, deeply broken, which I think says so much about, for those of us who want to learn that thing, we also have to deal with that shame that comes along with just like being expressed in that way. And it is a version of sexual self-expression. And it's a version of like, it's taking up space, right? When we decide to squirt, we are taking up space. We're taking up physical space. We're taking up emotional space, you know, in order to, for me to have a squirting orgasm, it takes energy and work and effort. And I also have to be willing to be vulnerable enough to either give that to myself or ask for it from my partner, because it is not a passive activity that happens just as a course for me anyway. It's not yet, maybe in the future it will be, but it's an active activity. It takes effort to get there, and that's all a very vulnerable process.
That makes me remember someone in the process of preparing for this was asking, well, whose desire is it? Is it the partner that's giving, or is it the partner that's receiving? Like their perception was that it's always the partner that's giving that wants to make the other person squirt.
Yeah.
So I started to ponder that, and I thought, okay, well, in my mind, it was exploring my body's function, seeing if it was even possible. And then it was also like, once I did it, it was a very cool trick. And I saw how the pupils of my partners dilated and how enthralled they were in the process, that I then stuck it in my back pocket and thought, oh, well, this is a really cool party trick.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on who's desiring it and if it's beneficial and desirable for both?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. I think a lot of people come to squirting as a performative thing. Men want to, so we'll use these broad sweeping terms, please forgive me, but I'll just, in order to make this point, a lot of men want to make a woman squirt because, and this is my belief from working with men, they sort of secretly doubt that our orgasms are real because there's no evidence that we had one. There's this little bit like they know, but they're also like, but did she, right? We have this trope in our culture of like women faking it, right? And so I think for them, a squirting orgasm feels like undeniable evidence that she orgasm, which is actually hysterical because you can squirt without having an orgasm.
Yeah.
Right. In fact, that's often the case. So this is just one of the many examples of our culture's total misinformation about sex and sexuality. But, and when you look at the link that I'm going to share with you, it's very much directed at men using that narrative of like, you're going to have proof that she has an orgasm. You're going to, right? Because I have to speak to men's desires to do this. But here's the trick. That's the gift wrapping that squirting often comes in. But on the inside, what the actual gift is not for men at all, right? They can enjoy it. They can pupil dilate. They can go, it's a great party trick. And for me, what being able to squirt has unleashed for me is actually far more transformative than just the performance itself. And the reason for that, just speaking from my personal experience, is that the ability to squirt represented the ability to release some of the pain and the trauma and the just lifetime of negative sexual experiences and shame and doubt about my own sexuality, my own pleasure, my worthiness to experience pleasure. When I squirted for the first time, it was as if something that had been building up for my entire life was released. Yeah. And it still does. Yeah, it was a cleansing experience. I mean, I don't think that there's a better way of saying it. It was like being washed of something with my own fluid, right? And it was incredibly pleasurable, and it was and it was fun. It was cool looking, right? It was awesome to see like all that fluid. That was true. And also the transformation was so much more than that. And what I really hope to do, and what I really hope to do by putting this course out into the world, because it is tawdry at first. It is salacious, but that's because it's like the Trojan horse, and you have to wrap it up in something so that people will join the party so that they can have the transformative experience. Because if you just were to sell someone, if you're just to say to a woman, hey, it could be totally transformative if you did this thing that's really famous for porn stars doing it. And there's a lot of pressure for you to do it. And now there's already pressure for you to be sexual, to have orgasms, to be constantly available for sex. Like there's already a bunch of pressure on you. Let's just slap one more thing. Now you also have to squirt. Yeah, not great. Doesn't sound fun. But if we can package it slightly differently and we can then deliver the transformation through the squirting orgasm, I actually think that we can find a lot of empowerment for ourselves. We can find a deeper connection to our own pleasure. We can find more and deeper permission to be sexually expressed by the example of this very physical, space-taking, delightful activity. And like that's why I would recommend to any woman that's even a shade of interested that she give herself and her partner permission to try to make this happen, no matter what her partner, male or female or non-binary, thinks about it.
I'm ready. I'm like on your team. I'm like, I'm ready to march. Yes. Whatever this march is for squirting empowerment, you've talked me into it. So let's talk a little bit more about, like, you already led into this, but what turns you on about this topic? And you just went there in like a deep way. I'm also curious about all the ways.
Yeah. So what turns me on about this topic? That's a great question. So going back to my very first squirting experience, I think the initial thing that turns me on is just like, holy mackerel, there's more. You know, I thought I was already having really good sex. God, what little I knew. But the thing that turned me on was just like this awareness that actually, no matter how deep you've taken your sexual, no matter how deep I've taken my sexual practice and my pleasure practice, there's actually more to it than that. I also have a friend who is, again, very similar, like taught herself how to squirt, and she's like so perfected it. And now it's kind of like her trademark. And in fact, I kind of wrote about this the other day. Her husband actually asked her to stop squirting so much. And what she's like, first of all, she's like, hard pass. This is my right. I love to ejaculate. I'm going to keep ejaculating. But she's told me about experiences, and this resonates with me on this like big turn on level where she's like, you know, maybe they've invited a third person into their bedroom and she will just sit back and watch the two of them. Well, she just makes herself squirt over and over and over and over again, just from the joy of like watching this thing happen. And I think that it's like squirting touches on this like kind of kinky, kind of taboo thing, yes, right? Yeah. It's like, yeah. So I guess all those things really turn me on about it. The fact that we can do it, the fact that we can just express in this like so powerful, visceral, visual, physical way is so awesome.
It kind of reminds me, like I as a child always wanted to be able to stand up and pee. That like standing up and peeing on something, I have 3 brothers. They would all stand on top of our roof and like pee off of things, and like it was like they were marking their territory in a sense, and I was so jealous of that. And I realized that feeling is what I feel when I squirt. Is just like, yeah, I just marked my territory. I'm like, I was gonna say leaking my power, but leaking doesn't sound. I'm like
spreading my power. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a huge turn on for me. That feeling of just like I own this. I owned the bedroom.
Yeah, totally. I love that.
Yeah.
I also love watching and coaching other women through that experience because I've been blessed to be present for a lot of women saying, no, I can't. And then because we're in a sexual context and we have the container to set that up, like actually making that happen for a woman for the first time and just like seeing this sort of like blossoming in her of like this new experience coming to light and this new sensation, this new pleasure coming to light. It's like this unfurling of something that's really cool too.
That joy, like the first time I squirted was around 10 years ago. So even preparing for this, I was like, man, I forget what the hype is all about, but I have a girlfriend that recently learned to squirt, and it was like she was a champion of the world for that week. She was just raging hard in her power in this like really excited floating way. And so
I love that.
Fun to
and I do want to touch on this because I don't want anyone who's watching to get the impression that this is like something I do every 3 days or every time I have sex with my husband, or, you know, it's something that I'm just like running around and creating puddles everywhere. Like, and that would be fun. I'm not opposed to doing that, but squirting isn't accessible to me just on the drop of a hat. It's not accessible every time that I masturbate. It's not accessible every time that I have sex. I have to work towards it. It requires quite a bit of buildup, a lot of G-spot stimulation. And so if you're not experiencing it, or you have tried to experience it, it hasn't happened very easily for you, there's nothing wrong.
Yes.
Like, there's nothing wrong. And there's a certain percentage of women for whom it might just not be possible to have the squirting orgasm, you know? And so I want to like be just very clear that this is a process. It's something that like takes work, and it's very rewarding when we can do it. And also I think once the first time you've done it, once you kind of got the connections going, oh, okay, this, you got to push here and let go there. Once you've done it mechanically, it makes a lot more sense. You can do it more easily, but it's not for the faint of heart. This is a challenging sexual activity that takes work.
Yeah. And also, so other experiences that I've had with squirting is that I feel exhausted afterwards. Like I recognize if I'm not following my own desires, and say that my partner has like a scripted idea of an expectation or a goal, and they're like, we're going to squirt and I'm going to make you squirt until you can't squirt any longer, I can begin to feel depleted. So that is something to really be aware of in this, that you want to do this for yourself and for your own body, and to be aware of like, once you start doing it, when feels good to end, because you feel like you just lost all of your camel's back of water.
Totally. And then if your partner has this idea, this very like erotic expectation of like, okay, you're gonna squirt and then we're gonna go back to like heavy pounding, because they're so aroused, it was so hot, right? And also I find for myself that after a squirting orgasm, my vagina just relaxes on a level that it is not usually capable of relaxing, right? Plus there's all this fluid, there's like, you know, it makes sense that the temptation is there, but like, there's been times where I had to call it entirely, like, we're done. I'm not capable of giving more. And so thank you so much for helping me to reach this height of ecstasy, and like, I'm gonna conk out now.
Yes, so true. Love that. Listening to your own needs, advocating for your own needs, asking for that. So important. What advice would you give to someone wanting to enter this and trying this, like, as a first step? I love creating like a little homework for people to do afterwards, so that they're not just left hanging.
I like to co-create this together, because I actually would love to hear your thoughts as well. So for me, the very first step would be to just get great at stimulating your G-spot. Like that would be, I would say, you know, and without even like trying to squirt, the first step would not be like, go for the gold. The first step would be like, get so familiar with your G-spot, like get so familiar with the change in your physical body as you move through different states of arousal. Maybe invest in a good toy that has like a J or a U shape that you can kind of like hook towards your G-spot. That would be my very...
I have a thing to add to that, because I get very distracted by the texture of my G-spot. Like
if you're using your fingers?
If I'm using my fingers, I'm more in this like, whoa, what is that feeling? Like, wow. And then I'm not in the like, oh, I'm relaxed and this is And so I also just learned recently, after having a sexological bodywork session, that my G-spot is like only this deep inside. And I think that so often we see this, like, it has to be this huge come hither motion. And I was actually told that I had scar tissue beyond that level. And so I think that could possibly be from like jabbing and like fast movement in the wrong place. So I want to give everyone that information so that you can be more curious, because a lot of G-spots are just at the opening.
Yeah.
And they could be anywhere from the opening to like a finger's length or 3 inches. So it's really important to actually identify where that is. And also there's different types of that motion. There is the motion where you're moving the skin on top of the tissue. There's also like running over it. So that's more like where you're running over. I forget the other one.
There's like a windshield wipers back and forth across the G-spot. And then for me, what works the best is like a pull towards inwards up on the body, and like a pretty aggressive pull, which is why being so familiar with your G-spot and your turn on, and because if you go to feel for your G-spot right now, unless you're very, very aroused, you're not going to feel it, right? So you actually have to become aroused for a long enough time for the G-spot to become engorged with blood in order to even feel it. And yeah, there's women who are vulva-bodied people that can even push their G-spot to outside of their bodies, right? Because it's so close to the edge, right? It's so cool. And yet we know so very little. We're so poorly educated on it. Even us, even people who have been sex research and obsessed for this, for our lives.
Yeah. That's why I think tool, like you were saying, a toy, one of my favorite toys for this is the Enjoy wand. It's stainless steel. There's something apocalyptic proof about it. It can double as a nunchuck or like a boomerang, and it's weighted. So you just let it drop into you and you just tug up. So
I apologize. My whole laptop just told me it was going to die, even though we've only been at this for an hour.
That's okay.
Now you know what it looks like beyond here.
Thank you for inviting us into your bedroom.
Yeah. My pleasure.
I'm going to take a look at the group to just see what people have been saying. Yeah, enjoying the Enjoy Pure Wand. Love this. So I want to just invite any questions for either Kaitlyn or I on this subject. And Kaitlyn, while they're doing that, you can talk about what's coming up for you, what's exciting, different invitations.
Awesome. So if you're interested in finding me in the world, I exist a lot on YouTube, youtube.com/Kaitlyn V. You can also find me if you search Better Sex Coach onto YouTube. And as I said, I work primarily with men on helping them to expand their sexuality and their sexual confidence. And if you're watching and you're interested, I mean, a lot of women do watch me. I'm not suggesting that that's not be the case. There's a lot of good information out there, but my sort of specialty is helping men to become better lovers. And doing it in a way that's very like approachable for them, very digestible for them. So I highly recommend that you send your male partners over to my YouTube as well, or watch together. And again, if you're interested, I have 3 master classes. I just launched my squirting master class. Today is the first day that's available for the public, which is actually almost just a coincidence. We didn't really plan that so intentionally. It just was in flow. So if you're interested in that, please, I'll put the link in the comments for this video. So if you want to check that out, or you want to maybe give that as a little gift to your partner, a little quarantine gift, hey, here. I also talk a lot about, obviously squirting itself is part of a entire constellation of things related to women's pleasure and women's sexuality that I think we would all of us who have male lovers would be better suited if they knew this kind of stuff, and if we didn't have the pressure on ourselves to educate them all the time. Because I don't know about you, but sometimes I just want my partner to do the work to meet me where I am, right? Instead of me having to explain, here's the Gspot and here's the different flavors and here's the touch, and also it requires this much turn, I'd like for him, and he's pretty invested, but I like for him to like kind of come fully prepared and aware and educated on like my body and what it needs, so that I don't get thrown off in my moments of pleasure on trying to explain it.
Yes. Thank you so much for that. Other things that are showing up. So the next show that I am having on Opening the Bedroom Doors is with Miss Monday Jones, pro dominatrix, and we're talking about spiritual kink. That's on May 1st. I'm going to try from now on to do this show on the same dates every month. So the 1st and 15th of every month, and that'll be at 2:30, but I'll provide more information in this private group. Invite anyone you want to this group on Facebook, Opening the Bedroom Doors. I also have 3 classes coming up. I have a mind-melting erotic spanking workshop where you're going to learn all about why pain and pleasure is so euphoric feeling and how to feel really equipped in that. That's on April 26th. I also have a pleasure mastery workshop on May 1st. That is all about how to feel really masterful in pleasure and understanding your desires and turn on. And then May 22nd, sex and sensuality for the super sensitive. That is for those people that feel more particular and sensitive because their nervous systems are heightened, and we're going to help you navigate that. So I'm going to take a look at the questions now. Let's see. How do you know when you're feeling squirting and then relax enough to let it happen? I definitely get nervous that I'm about to get to the space that's all wet, and then often stop sex to go to the bathroom. So how do I let it happen?
That's a great question. So the answer is kind of tucked into the question itself. I've just put that in there, by the way. You have to let it happen, right? So one tip that I haven't tried myself yet, actually, because I'm launching the squirting course. I've been hearing all these amazing stories from people who have different experiences squirting. And someone gave me this piece of advice, which was that she actually prepares her body by taking a gentle laxative, like a smooth move senna tea, during the day, and emptying her bladder right before. Now, the reason that she takes this laxative is because she wants to be able to push down, right? To put that pressure down on her entire pelvic floor, including urethra, including bladder, including anus, and not have to worry about anything happening, not have to worry about feeling the sensation or the desire to release a bowel movement, not have to worry about whether or not her bladder is clear or full or empty. So she prepares for, like, she's preparing to have sex for a long time too, right? So she's preparing to have like an epic night of sex, which I think lets you know also that if you're going to prepare for squirting, you can start days before, right? You not necessarily just launch into it in that moment. I'm going to go for it. I mean, you can do both, right? There's no right or wrong. But yeah, so anyways, the reason I said that is because whatever you need to do to clear your head so that you can release the concern that you're going to have any bodily fluids that you are not prepared to dealing with those in advance. Now, of course, like I said, you can empty your bladder first so that you know that it's not urine that's releasing. And after a certain point, there are going to be body fluids and there are risks. And if we can also deal with the sort of shame around urine or the shame around fecal matter, like we can kind of come to a place where we're okay with the risk of experiencing those, which again also allows us to let go more fully.
I saw someone say, and she's not afraid to shit herself then after taking a laxative. That was my first.
Yeah.
Was like,
oh yeah, early enough that she has then cleared her bowel.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cleansing is the point of that.
Right. With enough time to have cleared the bowels before getting into the bedroom.
Yes. I also really like the practice of like urinating before having sex, or there's so many times where you have to pause during sex to pee. And that's super important. And also it reminds me of my first orgasm experience. I took a long time to figure out how to orgasm, and that's because of that fear on the other end of the peak. So I relate that very similarly to squirting, that there can be this fear of like, what happens after, or what happens when I'm doing it. And so I think taking those precautions, like you said, of like priming your nervous system, doing the things that makes your mind feel rested, and then I would say practice it on your own.
Yeah.
Because practicing it on your own is going to allow for more exploration. You can have oopsie moments and it's totally fine. And that way you can be more in charge, I guess, in those times. Yeah.
And you can practice it your own in a space that, like the bathtub. Like I love self-pleasuring in the bathtub. It's like something I started doing when I was a child and still love doing today as an adult. So
yes. Their follow-up question is, so if I've cleared my bladder, that means squirting is what is happening though. So thanks for the answer.
Oh,
So,
excellent.
yes. Also, you'll be able to know that you are squirting when I have done many smell checks and just like, is that urine? What's going on? And it's when it's not urine, it's just a clear liquid.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can be a little like off clear, off white, whatever.
Yeah, a little creamy.
Yeah. And the smell is completely neutral. It does not smell like urine. So that's a really great thing.
Yeah. And it's actually, the liquid is actually coming from your blood. It's removed of red blood cells and a couple other things that are like in your blood. But what's essentially happening is that in the urethral sponge, it's actually taking liquid from your blood, removing those factors from it, and then using it to flush your urethra.
Oh, cool. Love that. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being my guest. I just adore you and want to talk about all kinds of things with you on camera. Why not?
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you everyone for attending. And I wish you the absolute best in this journey. Feel free to connect with me if you want more. And thank you so much for having me on, Jessie. I appreciate it so much.
Yes. Okay. Ready? We're going to blow kisses to each other.
Okay.
And
ready.
We can do like squirting themed kisses.
Okay.
Whatever that shows up for. Okay, ready?
Okay, ready? Mwah!